if you come across aggressive, posture, needy, attached when you're talking to them, you're attached to making the sale, you have commission breath, it triggers people's brains, even in the first 10 seconds, to go into what we call fight or flight mode. You've heard of that, right?
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Perfectly Mentored. I'm your host, Jason Portnoy. They say the single most effective way to sell anything to anyone in 2021 is to be a problem finder and a problem solver, not a product pusher. My guest on this episode is Jeremy Miner. He embodies that philosophy, which has made him one of the wealthiest sales professionals on the planet. He is the chairman of Seventh Level, a global sales company. Jeremy's particular brand of sales training has helped over 140,000 people either 3x, 5x, and even 10x their business. He's been featured on Forbes, USA Today, Inc., Entrepreneur Magazine, Thrive Global, Yahoo Finance, Disrupt Magazine, and a host of other publications. His new book, The New Model of Selling, Selling to an Unsellable Generation, co-authored by Jerry Acuff, the CEO of Delta Point, is being published early this fall in 2021. Forget everything you knew about sales and pay attention to this episode. Check it out. Jeremy, my man, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me on. We're traveling this week, so we're up in Lake of the Ozarks, Missouri. So we have a lake home about an hour and a half north of where we live, primary residence, I guess. And we're just having some fun and going to do this podcast with me. I'm excited to be on here.
I'm excited to have you. And Ozarks, I mean, how famous did that get from,
have you
from
seen
that
the
show right now? Exactly. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I wonder how many people actually heard of the Ozarks before the show.
No, this place is popular. You know, we've had a lake house here for about 10 years, and we sold ours probably a year and a half ago. It was like right before COVID happened and everything. And then we bought one about 2 months ago. We bought a new one a couple months ago, but man, it was hard even to find a place because everybody, like from Chicago and St. Louis and LA and New York, when they had all these lockdowns, it's like people were like moving in here to the hordes because in Missouri, there was really never any mask mandates unless you lived like in the inner cities of like St. Louis or Kansas City. So like all these people like in these lockdown cities, like came to Lake of the Ozarks from some TMZ article about partying at the lake or whatever that came out. I'm not kidding you. This is a real story. And like literally drove real estate up by about 40 to 50% for the same home a year ago. You're paying about 50% more, which is insanity. And like literally we'd be like, okay, we want a house that's this size, that's, you know, X amount of dollars. And they'd be like, there's one on the market. And you're like, okay, I guess I have no choice. And by the way, you have to pay 40% more for the same home. And there's no negotiations.
Well, I mean, but that's 40% because you're a master salesperson. Everyone else was paying 50%.
maybe
right?
That's what it was. I don't know, man. I felt like that I got taken advantage of. That's okay. We're good.
Good. Look, so much to talk about. Let's start here. Yeah. Talk to me about your background and how you became one of the go-tos, the top go-tos when it comes to sales trainings.
Well, you know, I had I think a somewhat decent sales career. You know, I was, I think it's still out on Google if you Google my name, but I was ranked like number 44 or 45, somewhere in the world, as one of the highest paid salespeople selling anything. So it was an award by the Direct Selling Association they give out like every year or something. So I was ranked in that for like 6-7 years straight in my sales career. I was making multiple 7 figures a year, and I was a W-2 salesperson. So like working at a company, you know, going into the office, calling my leads, you know, check in, check out type of thing. And I had a pretty good career, made a lot of money. And back in 2016, I kind of semi-retired. And I just, you know, I was like, I'm not sure what I'm going to do, but I just kind of took about 3, 4, 5 months off, and I got.
How old were you at this point when you semi-retired? If you don't mind
let's see. I launched Seventh Level about 3 years ago. So I just turned 44. So I was 40, I think, when I retired from like sales. 40. Yeah, probably about 40. I just got really bored, and no joke, I was sitting on Facebook one day and this ad came up with this quote unquote sales guru. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. You know, I'm in sales type of thing. I did pretty good. I'll check it out. And so I bought the course and I started buying all these courses, and I'm like, I'd start to go through them like, man, this stuff doesn't work. Like if I use this stuff, Like in my industries that I sold in, I was in 4 different industries where I made over 7 figures a year in commissions, not salary, but commissions. And I'm like, I would make 10% of what I made had I followed these people's advice. Like the things they're teaching trigger sales resistance. They don't know, right? So, and I can go over my background in human psychology and behavioral science if you want me to, but it really sparked an interest. Like, wow, if this guy or this company's the go-to expert of sales, and what he trains like doesn't really work that well anymore. Like it's not 1985, it's 2021. um, Maybe I should help people out, because it just got annoying to me. I was like, gosh, this stuff sucks. And people are like taking like, oh, this is going to be good. And, and they were taking it up like it was the gospel. And I'm like, that they don't know what they don't know. And that's why they struggle so much. So that really got me into like, hey, I'm going to write my own sales training courses. And I spent the next 6 months, I literally like went into my man cave. So I had like a man cave office in my house where we live. And I literally spent 6 months in there. My wife can attest, like I literally did not come out. It was like 7 days a week. And I wrote all of our training out. And then, which we have like a 22-hour virtual training course at this point that we're still adding training to, okay, for our clients. And I wrote everything out and then just went and shot it. And then kind of the rest is just the history from there. It's been a good run the last 3 years for sure.
Do you find that with the courses or the old school teachings, I guess we'll get into it, and I promise I'm going to ask all about it.
Sure.
But the aggressive nature, do you find that it doesn't work because there's no congruency? So they're being taught like to say these ballsy, confident lines, but you may not be that person. And I would say in communication, period, and you understand human behavior better than I do, but even when it comes to sales, congruency is super important.
Well, I think congruency is important, but there are certain words and things that you say as a salesperson that just trigger sales resistance. And there's a reason for that. Okay. So, in subconsciously, the way that the mind works, that
What are some of those words, if you don't mind me
yeah, like sign the
interrupting?
contract. I'm just following up. Who's the other decision makers? I mean, they're just little things like that people think they've been taught to say that trigger sales resistance, especially like, oh, I'm just following up with you. Like everybody says that has called that prospect 100 times, selling them anything. So instantly when you say the same words that every single salesperson says to them for decades, it instantly triggers resistance. And it just goes off in their mind like salesperson. It's like when a telemarketer calls you and you hear the trigger words, right? You instantly shut down. And it's the same thing. Like if you go into, let's say you're going to go buy a pair of jeans, right? And you're like, man, I need some jeans. I've got a bunch of holes in my jeans. You walk into the store and the person comes over and says, how can I help you, sir? Just looking. That's a trigger question.
Even though we need help.
Even though we need help. So you're triggering the resistance. You don't know what you don't know. So that's just an example. So within the first like 7 to 12 seconds of any interaction you are with a human being. So whether that's if you're on a sales call, like if you're calling on the phone, whether it's a cold call, whether if you have an appointment with an inbound lead on Zoom, whether you're in a boardroom meeting presenting to shareholders, trying to, go over your solution, whether you're going door to door, B2B, B2C, it doesn't matter. Your prospects subconsciously are picking up on social cues from you. Okay. So they're picking up on, verbal and nonverbal cues based on your tonality and what you are saying and or asking that triggers their brain to react in one of two ways. Okay. So I want everybody to write this down that's watching this. It's really going to help you. Okay. If you come across aggressive, posture, needy, attached when you're talking to them, you're attached to making the sale, you have commission breath, it triggers people's brains, even in the first 10 seconds, to go into what we call fight or flight mode. You've heard of that, right?
Yep.
Fight or flight mode. And they try to get rid of you very quickly. Like, I'm too busy now. Can you call me back later? Or we don't really need this, or we already have that, or we don't have the money for that, or I'm good, or can you just send me a proposal? Can you just send me a quote? Just call me back a week, a month, a year later. Everybody listening, does that happen to you? Well, now you know why. Okay. Now, if you do understand human behavior, if you understand the right questions to ask, if you understand the right tonality and pausing, even pausing, you'd be surprised. Okay. Most people are like, pausing helps in sales. Oh, for sure. We can talk a lot about that. But if you come across more neutral and unbiased, it triggers brains to become curious enough to feel like they want to engage with you, that they want to open up to you because they feel like you have something that might be very important to them. So we have to come across detached from what I call the expectations of making the sale, and instead focus on whether there's even a sale to be made in the first place. And when you come across in that mentality and that way of thinking with your prospects, it triggers them to let their guard down. Selling is about disarming the prospect where they let their guard down, where they actually open up and actually will get involved with your questions rather than you asking a question and they give a little answer, and you ask a surface level question and they give a little answer, and then you go into your pitch and then they say, I want to think it over. And then you start chasing them, and good Lord, like, stop beating your head against the pavement. Doesn't have to be that way.
I love it. And if you're okay, I'd love for this to get super tactical if you're open to it.
Whatever you want, man. I'm here.
Cool. So I think you said a lot there, and I want to walk through it. And I think, but step one, I've done a lot of sales calls and I've spoken to a lot of companies, and by no means am I an expert, but I think most people don't even go into the call prepared, right?
Sure.
So talk to me about how you teach people to prepare for the sales call, what that kind of looks like for you. And I also want to bring up something you said about not being super attached to the sale, because a lot of people, when they're starting off, are super attached to the sale. It's hard to sit there and say, no, I don't need this. I don't need this. I'm going to pretend like I don't need it, when they're like, oh, I really need this. If I lose another deal, I'm going to like not have food on the table. So talk to me about how you overcome that mindset, even though it may be the opposite. You may actually need it more than ever. And then how do you also prepare for a sales call?
Yeah. So let's address that question first. And I'll go like, how do you prepare for a sales call? Because that really depends on if you sell B2B, more complex selling environment, to companies rather than like a B2C audience, because it would be a lot different. So, first, the thing that we always talk about, and if you've been through any of our training or you've seen me at events talk about, is we talk about, we have to become what are called problem finders and problem solvers. So I want you to think about in your mind yourself, like just everybody hearing me. Okay. When we go to events, like this was before COVID, right? Live events. Now it's virtual events or whatever. And I ask an audience and I say, why did you get in sales? Or I ask a business owner, what's the purpose of you being in business? Or if I ask a salesperson, why did you get in sales? Most people say, to make more money, so I could have more time, so I could have my own schedule, so I could live the life I want. And that's great. But if you answer that way, on whom was your answer really more focused on?
It's selfish.
Was it focused on you, or was it focused on your prospects? It was, of course, focused on you and your own agenda. And that comes across when you're talking with your prospects. Now, I don't mean not to, not be, when I say, I always say enthusiasm kills more sales than everybody knows. What I mean is, keep your enthusiasm to yourself. The moment you're like really excited and in their face and like used car sales me, you just lose so many deals. Okay.
But do we really so it's interesting you say that, because I'm in the service space and I like solving problems and I like helping people. But if I truly loved helping people, I'm a for-profit business. So obviously making money is important to me, because that's what it is. And that's the primary goal of my business, as much as it is to help people. Because if it was to help people, I'd be a charitable organization and I would just do everything for free.
Of course, yeah.
So, I mean, I just kind of want you to expand on that a little bit.
The only way you can help people is by people purchasing your products to solve their problems. I mean, I want to make sure you're very clear. Like, I made multiple 7 figures a year as a W-2 salesperson. Do you think I was closing deals? Probably. Was I like, do you want to buy at the end? Like, no, that's not what I mean by that. So when I say keep your enthusiasm to yourself, okay, you have to come across as somebody who's there to help them, not somebody who's there just to sell them so you can make a commission. It's a completely different way of thinking, okay? So what I mean by problem finding and problem solving is, one thing we have to understand is that most of your prospects, when you first start talking to them, don't even realize they have a problem. Or maybe they realize they have a problem, but maybe they don't know how bad the problem really is. Or maybe they don't know the consequences of what's going to happen if they don't do anything about solving the problem, like if they stay in status quo. Or through your questioning ability, let's say you really learn NEPQ, Neuro-Emotional Persuasion Questions that we teach. Through your questioning ability, not only are you helping them find out what their real problem is, but through that process, you're able to help them find 2 other problems, or maybe 3 or 4 or 5 other problems that they didn't even know they had 20 minutes before they got on the damn phone with you or on Zoom with you or in person. And what does that do in their mind when you've helped them see, not by telling them their problems, but by asking the right questions that allowed them to see what their real problems are? How do they start to view you at that point? Like the expert. You're the expert. You're the trusted authority. How do they view all the other salespeople that ask a few surface level questions about their problems and then go into their pitch? They commoditize them. They push them over in the corner and they look at them as just another salesperson trying to stuff their solution down their throat. And that's why salespeople struggle so much when they don't have to. So you have to become like, problem solving is important, but if they don't buy from you, well, you can't solve their problems, right? So in our day and age, you have to be even better at problem finding. You know, one of our clients that we have at 7th level, you might even had him on your podcast. He's a guy named Brandon Kane. Okay, he wrote a best-selling book called How to Stand Out. It's called Hook Point: How to Stand Out in a 3-Second World. Okay, we do all of his sales and everything for his teams. He writes in that book, there are over 3 billion content providers on social media that everybody in here in sales competes with to attract your prospects' attention every single day. You're literally competing with 13 and 14-year-old kids on TikTok. 20 years ago, do you know how many content providers there were you're competing with? Less than 1 million. Now you're competing against 3 billion, okay? So because of this information age we live in, the power of the internet, especially social media, your prospects are being sold to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, month after month, year after year. And if you think about it, you know, your prospects, you wake up in the morning, you get on your phone, on your Facebook, and you've got Facebook ads trying to sell you something. You walk into the kitchen, you turn on the TV while you get your coffee. You've got commercials trying to sell you something. You get into your car, you turn on a podcast, you turn on anything, and there's commercials in there trying to sell you something, right? You get to work, you drive down the road and there's billboards trying to sell you something. So because we're constantly being sold all of the time, your prospects have become desensitized to like trigger words and those things that people use that trigger them to react to that. So as salespeople and business owners, you really have to amplify your skill level and learn skills that work with human behavior. Otherwise you just get left, we always call it, you get left behind in the trash basket of life. You just get commoditized.
So I love all that and well said. So talk to me about the actual, like how you teach your sales team or other sales teams to like, what do they need? Mindset going into a sales call. I know you touched about it, but what's the overall preparation of like, before you jump on a call, you must do the following?
Well, sure. I mean, here's the thing with me. Like, you're going to hear something probably completely at odds with every other person that you've met.
That's why you're on here. That's why I like you.
I'm like anti, or I'm like completely opposite. Like most salespeople, sales trainers, like you need to go meditate for 30 minutes in the morning, and then you need to write in your journal, and then you need to listen to, you know, Tony Robbins' video. And Tony's great. You know, motivation stuff's great. But here's the problem with all that. That's all great and dandy, but when your prospect answers the phone and says hello, or when you meet them in person or you meet them in a boardroom meeting, all that stuff goes out the window if you don't know exactly what to say and ask that's going to trigger them to want to engage with you and view you as the expert. Okay. Your personal development, you get smacked right in the face. What's that Mike Tyson fight? Like everything goes well, your plan goes well until you get punched in the nose.
Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face.
That's exactly what salespeople do. And then they wonder like, oh, I'm reading so many self-growth and I'm journaling and I'm meditating all the time. None of that's going to help you close more deals. Okay. It's about your skill level. Now, obviously you have to have the right mindset to want to take action. That's important, but it's your skill level that's so important. Like, what questions do you have? Are you just winging it when you get on the call? Like, are you really prepared?
So script or no script? Are you in favor?
You have to have a sales structure. I don't like, when I say scripts, I mean sales structure. Okay. Because sometimes the questions will change depending on who you're talking to. Okay. So many people say like, oh, you don't, you know, you got to be natural. Yes, you do have to be natural, but it's like being a Hollywood actor, right? So look at, who's your favorite movie star? Just tell me.
Ed Norton.
I don't even know who that is. Who is that? What movie's he in?
He was in American History X. He was in He was in Rounders.
What
One
kind
of
of
my favorite
shows are
actors.
you watching
Okay,
over there, dude?
okay, so I'll use another one. Let's call it Leonardo DiCaprio.
Okay,
Everyone knows who
perfect.
he is.
Yeah, Lee.
Go,
Okay, everybody knows him. Okay,
go.
I like George Clooney. I like Leo. I like all those guys. But let's say you're Leo. Okay, everything that he says in his movies is what 100% scripted. It's lines. But when you watch a movie with him, do you like feel like he's scripted? No, it sounds really natural, right? Okay. He's not just reading off the script like today I'm going to, but he doesn't sound like a telemarketer. He's memorized his lines and he's
He's
acting,
practiced.
he's practiced. He's becoming like when you watch him, you don't view him as like Leo in like what's the movie The Great Gatsby. You don't view him as Leo. You view him as the Great Gatsby, as the character he's portraying. So salespeople have to be the same way. You have to memorize your sales structure. You have to memorize your lines. You have to memorize your questions so they sound natural. You have to role play. You have to pause. You have to work on your tonality. You can't just read the script, okay? But you also can't just not have anything in front of you or just not have anything memorized and just go off the cuff like, oh, blah, 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 blah. Like there's this big myth out there that, top salespeople got the gift of the gab. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. I'll tell you, salespeople that we go in companies and train like, oh, I've got the gift of the gab. We pull up their numbers. Yeah, you definitely got the gift of the gab, and that's why you're down at the bottom, okay? Telling is not selling, right? Everybody's heard of that. Okay, gift of the gab is not going to make you a ton of sales. Your questioning ability and your listening ability is what actually makes sales for you. So when we prep for calls for any companies we train or even our own internal sales team or whatever, we have the questions all written out. We've got them memorized in our mind, what we're going to ask. If they say this, how are we going to respond to that? So we're prepared. That's why our closing percentages are off the charts with the companies we train. We don't wing it. Winging anything is always going to give you less than average results. Let's just be real.
So I agree because I think one of the biggest things is salespeople just want to sell and they don't ask enough questions. Like you said, they don't even if they ask enough questions, they don't ask the right questions. So
they don't know how, right?
So let's talk about that. Let's get tactical. What are the right questions and what are, like you said, consequence questions?
Oh, I'll give you an example of a good consequence. So, one of the consequence questions. So, in our training, in our virtual training courses, we teach everything from connecting questions that take the focus off the prospect or off of you and put it on the prospect when you're first talking to them. Okay. We teach situation questions, which helps the prospect and you find out what their real situation is, like what's going on. Not only do these questions help you, more importantly, it's helping them see what their real situation is, okay? Those are more factual questions. Then we move into the stage called problem awareness, okay? We have to ask problem awareness questions that help the prospect find out what their real problems are. Like I said, most don't even know what their real problems are, right? We can't assume we know, we have to ask. And then more importantly, we have to find out what's behind the problem, like the root causes of the problem. Every salesperson can really find a problem the prospect has. But to be great at sales, you have to help them see what the root cause of the problem is. And then to go even further, if you want to be the best at sales, you have to be able to help them see how it's affecting them, the problem and what's happening, okay? Then we move into solution awareness questions. Now that we've helped them see what their real problems are and they're very emotional and they're bought in, which 10 minutes, 15 minutes before, they didn't even think they really had a problem, okay? Now we're moving into what's called solution awareness questions. And solution awareness questions basically help them see, here's their current state. We call that their current situation, okay? Here's where they want to be, their future. We call that the objective state. So your solution awareness questions help them see what their objective state is going to look like or their future looks like once all of these problems that you've helped them find from your questions are solved. What's that gap? Now, below average salespeople or average salespeople don't have the right questions. They don't know. Well, I'm going to give you a few examples here in a minute. And so they're not able to create much of a gap in the prospect's brain, in their mind, of where they are compared to where they want to be. So that's how they value your services far less. And that's why they're like, oh, it seems kind of expensive. Like it's another monthly bill. I don't know if we can afford it. The best salespeople in the world are able to help them see, here's where you are, here's where you want to be, this huge gap in between. And so they look at like, oh my gosh, I only have to pay this to get this. That's cheap. Okay. Like if I'm selling a $100,000 solution that's going to make that company an extra $15 million a year in revenue, and you're able to help them see that much of a gap, they're going to look at that like freaking a dollar. They're like, where do I send the money? Okay. There's no chasing or anything. All right. And then we move in. Now, once we help them see what their future is going to look like and they're emotional and bought in, then we're going to yank that away with asking what I call consequence questions. Okay. So I'll give you I'll give you a couple of generic versions. It's basically like, okay, but what are you going to do if nothing changes here and the problem stays the same? That's a consequence question. Now we have to ask that with the right tonality. If I say, what are you going to do, John, if nothing changes and the problem stays the same? Well, I don't know. See, you're not, you have to have the right tone out. But hold on though. What are you going to do though if nothing changes and this gets even worse? See the face? Okay, the skepticism. Okay, that triggers certain behaviors in your prospect's mind. Okay, where they're like, oh my gosh. Okay, so I'll give you an example. Let's say if you sold. Let's say if you sold like lead services or something, like let's say you sold, I was just working on a script, right? I've got this script I was working on right before I got on here with a company that sells like lead generation services to big corporations, like Fortune 1000, Fortune 500 companies. So with their consequence question, I've got it pulled up here. We would say, oh, okay, but John, what if you don't do anything about this though, and you keep getting these lower quality leads to your sales team, and your sales keep stagnating another 3, 6, or 12 months from now? Okay. See that they've already said, oh my gosh, here's what it's going to look like. Once we've solved this problem, we've got these great leads. I'm going to look so good for my boss. I'm going to be able to do this. The company's going to be able to grow this. And I just jerked it away. But hold on, what are you going to do though if you go to the CEO and you don't do anything and you keep getting these lower quality leads to your salespeople and your sales keep stagnating the next 3, 6, 12 months? What happens then? See how I do that? And that gets them to defend themselves. Oh no, we're going to do something about it, right? They're defending themselves on why they have to change. Or here's like a generic version. Okay, but what are the ramifications if your company doesn't do anything about this? What are the possible ramifications if you don't do anything? Consequence question. That's just a different version of that. See how that works?
Yeah, I love it. And I think you covered tonality and pausing in there as well. So there was a lesson there too.
Pausing is so important. Train companies are
pausing
like
pausing in the right spots, right?
Well, yeah, you can't be.
Hey, Jeremy, nice to meet you.
You have to
doesn't
pause
really work. Yeah,
in the inflection point. So let me give you an example. Like I don't get into politics. Like I'm kind of like an independent, like right in the middle. Just like you guys kill each other. I'll just like focus on sales training. That's my mojo. All right. I'm not going to get involved, but with politics, I look at politicians and I look at their communication styles and I'm like, oh man, that guy's really bad. Or that lady's like horrible. Like, oh my gosh, if she would just say this, like people would react completely different. Like how my brain works all the time. So when I watch speeches, like one great communicator was like President Obama, right? And imagine when you heard him up on stage or in talks, he was very good at verbal pausing. So he would make a point and then he would pause or in between. So let's say if I'm going to ask a problem awareness question, and let's say if I sold, let's say if I sold cars, car dealership, right? And I'm going to ask the person if they like the car they already have. Okay, now there's questions you'd ask before that. You wouldn't just ask this as your first question, but the first primary question. Okay, so the car that you have now, do you like the vehicle you have? Okay, so do you see how I pause there? Do you like the vehicle you have? Why would I pause right there? Because that triggers them to think deeper about the question I ask right after. Okay, so it's where you're pausing. President Obama was really good at pausing to make a point, and that's why people were attracted to him. Okay, now like President Trump, the last president, although he had some great qualities too, did some great things. Of course, every president has their strengths and weaknesses. It's just kind of the way it goes. He's done some great things, but he wasn't very good at that. He didn't really pause. He just kind of rambles sometimes. So sometimes you'd kind of get lost in what he said, but that's kind of a different communication style. See the difference there?
Yeah. Yeah. No, great points. Talk to me about, the unmotivated salesperson, right? Everything's good. They made a couple of sales. They're riding high. And then we all know this. We all go through this. Things are great when you're making sales. And then when you hit a couple of no's, rejections, you start slowing down. You almost have to kind of resell yourself a little bit.
Mm.
What are some of your tips on getting, like back into it, like, and not
Man,
losing the
it's just
passion?
having the right skills, because if you have the right skills, if you have the right sales structure, you know that if you talk to 20 people and you do the process the right way, you're going to make a certain amount of sales. I think most salespeople, because they don't have that and they're just out winging it, and they're just, one week they get more lucky because there's like really, really like leads that already wanted it. And then the next week, the leads are a little bit harder. So they don't have a sales process and they don't convert. And then they get emotional. And like we see so many teams of salespeople when we come into companies that are like up and down and up and down and up and down. So what we have to do is teach them this sales structure that the whole company follows. So they go like this. That's what we want. We want that plane. Okay. So like I said, I'm going to say something completely different than probably anybody you've ever interviewed on sales. I don't believe in like, oh, I just got to pump them up and got to make better motivational speeches. That's great, but that doesn't last. Okay. When the prospect picks up the damn phone and says hello, if you're still winging it, if you're still using insane things like, hi, is this John? Hey, John, this is Jeremy. I'm with XYZ company. And the reason why I called you today was click. That's what most salespeople do in a cold call. And that's the rejection they get. Okay. And so it doesn't matter how much you get pumped up. If you keep saying things like that and keep using, techniques that work against human behavior, you're still going to get your ass kicked. It's just the way it is. So the way to get motivated is by having confidence in your sales process. You can only have confidence. I call it collective confidence, certainty. You can only have certainty if you know that your process actually works, because it actually works, you make sales with it. If you're just kind of winging it and it's up one week and down the next week, your sales process use doesn't really work. And it creates uncertainty, and it creates doubt, and it creates unmotivation.
Can anyone become a master salesperson?
Well, look at me, I did. Is anybody born out of your mother's womb with having advanced skills and like all these questions streaming out of your mind that you ask your prospects to get them to persuade themselves? No, those are acquired skills. Selling is something you acquire. I was born in a town of like 800 people. That's where I grew up. I was born in Arkansas, but I grew up in a town of like 800 people. My teachers didn't teach me how to sell. My parents, I grew up on a ranch. They didn't teach me how to sell. I was digging post holes to make fence. Okay. I learned how to sell by studying human behavior and human psychology and the brain actually works to make decisions. That is something you learn. It's not something you are born with. It's like golf. Like, is anybody born with golfing skills? No, you practice golf and you
Maybe
learn
maybe Tiger Woods. Maybe Tiger Woods. But yeah.
I don't know about that, man. I think his dad taught him from like
True.
when he was 2 years old up.
Yeah.
I'm not sure he was really born with like the right mechanics on how to
he was born with the right genes and genetics and able to do that. But either way, yes, your point is well taken.
I got a valid point. Okay.
Yeah, valid point. But I mean, so talk about the human behavior, right? Because I know you're big on that. What are some of the key observations you've had or seen that help you become a better seller?
Well, it's just like I said, it's one thing that we should probably preference here is that when you really think about what selling is, all selling is change. Sales is about one thing only, and it's about change. Okay. And it's about how good you are at helping your prospect see in their mind, to view in their mind, visualize that by changing their situation, paying for your product or service is far less risky for them than doing nothing at all, staying in the status quo. Their problems stay the same and nothing ever changes. Which is more risky? Okay, that's what we have to get the prospect to think. So when we train companies, we don't train them to go out and like, got to chase them and, hope and pray that they buy, because that's what most salespeople do. We get them to a point where the prospects are sending their funds to them, thanking them to send the money to them to solve their problems, to get them where they want to be. That's what selling is. And if your communication skills, if you're still using old school selling techniques from the stone ages of freaking selling,
ABC.
The ABCs of closing. I mean, that sounds good. Sounds cool. Put it in a movie. Glengarry Ginn Ross, but it's not 1991 or 93 when that movie came out. Like, selling has changed. Okay. Consumer buying behaviors have changed. We live in an information age. And I'm not talking about, oh, you just got to create some videos on IG and you're going to be a top salesperson. You have to talk to those people. Okay. So because those people know, because of the power of the internet and especially social media, they know they have many choices to choose the exact product or service that you offer. So because of that newfound power, they'll no longer be pushed or pressured by pushy salespeople because they know they have many other options to choose exactly what you do. So selling is all about change. But one thing we have to understand is, whether somebody wants something better or they're trying to get away from pain, it's about change. But here's the problem. Human beings don't like change. So I want to stress this. Sales is about change. Here's what you're going up against. Human beings do not like change, even though they say they do, because it makes us feel unsettled. It makes us feel uncomfortable. And it makes us especially feel uncomfortable when it's initiated by salespeople who are ready to pitch their products or services within 30 seconds of actually talking to us. Okay. So human behavior shows that we value tradition, consistency, and something that's familiar over something that is new and foreign to us. Okay. So one thing we have to see as salespeople and business owners is that you're not selling the thing. You're selling the results of that thing. Okay. You're not selling, you have like a digital marketing agency. You're not selling like leads. You're selling the results of those leads, which is more sales, decreased ad spend. That's what you're selling, right? If you're a real estate agent, you're not selling a home. You're selling the results of that home. Maybe it's getting them into a better neighborhood. Maybe it's giving them, in their mind, more prestige. Okay. If you're
The transformation of it.
Yes. You're not selling the thing, you're selling the results of that thing. And most people just, they haven't wrapped their minds around that yet.
So you brought up social media, which is great because I think, I see a ton of advertisers online and that's what I do for a living. And I think what's weird is people throw out real world sales tactics when it comes to online, right? They just think, okay, well, it doesn't apply because I could just hit 5 million people. And if, 1% of them or 10% of them buy, I'm happy. I'll just throw that same message out. So how does the NEPQ and your system and the way you train people, how does that principle apply for you to sell online? Whether it comes to ads or copy or emails, how does it apply?
Well, you're just going to get 3 or 4 times the return on your DPL, like dollar per lead. That's just what it implies. Like, let me give you an example. Like one of our largest clients is Google Ads. It's not Google AdWords anymore. They call it Google Ads or something. They rebranded or something. Okay. We train 4 of their largest divisions. Okay. It was our first B2B client when I started about 3 years ago. We just went all the way to the top. Nobody small business owners. We're just going to, luckily got a meeting with them and actually did halfway decent and they're a client. So when we train them, this is a company that, as you know, one of the biggest companies in the world, billions of dollars a year in revenue. Okay. These 4 divisions were making, tens of millions of dollars a year, but some of them were newer and they just didn't know what they're doing. One of them was cold calling. And they said, hey, come in, do an audit on our salespeople, listen to some of them. So I'd get on the phone, listen to them. And all they would talk about is just what the products and services did. Like if it was inbound AdWords, they would just talk about the algorithm and what it does and blah, 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 blah. They were selling the thing. They weren't selling the results of the thing. So I asked this person that I was meeting with, it was like the vice president of like, yada, yada, yada. I don't even remember, but I was asking her like, okay, so let's say I'm a salesperson, a new salesperson, and I'm going to get onboarded in this division today. What does my sales training look like? Can you walk me through that? And they're like, yes, we have 3 days where we put them over here in this department and we go over X and Y and Z. Well, all it was just product knowledge. We teach them how the cloud works. We teach them how, the algorithm works and blah, blah, all this technical stuff that made no sense to me. Okay. And I'm like, no. I'm not asking like product training. Like I'm asking like questions that get the prospect to want to engage, persuade. And Google really thought because they have this big brand that every person they cold call would be like, oh, Google, sure, go ahead. What's your pitch? But 99% of people would just hang up. Oh, we don't need that. We're not interested, blah, 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 blah. So they had this new one program that they were cold calling plumbers, electricians, small contractors. and they had these like list of these people that they would cold call. Okay. Everybody always like, Google cold calls? Yeah, they cold call. It's not, I guess they just don't advertise these people, but they cold call. And so they cold call, and they were trying to get these people to get like ad accounts.
Which is an important lesson for everyone listening, that if
I know.
the one of the largest online marketing companies or platforms in the world is cold calling is not dead for you. So
They have a list of contractors,
Yeah.
like, electricians, just all that
Yeah.
stuff, plumbers, and they call them and they talk about this new program. This was about 3 years ago. I don't know if they have it, but they called about this program that would like geo target like clients in their town, their like little neighborhoods and cities and blah, 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 blah. And they would just talk about how great it was and blah, blah. And most people just hung up with them, especially like plumbers and electricians. They're just skeptical of that stuff, right? So we came in there, wrote out their sales structure, put in what's called a problem statement when the person answers the phone. We were more focused on problems that they would know about rather than our solution. Okay. Guess what happened? The next quarter, sales up 244% in 3 divisions. Okay. That's the difference with working with human behavior. Before they had me, this was like, we were very small 3 years ago. We had just launched like 3 months before. Okay. The company they were with before us, I'm not going to name names, but it's been around since 1970 freaking one, like well before I was born. Okay. I don't know. My spirit was up in heaven or something. I'm not really sure. So this company had never gotten them more than a 10% increase in sales in a year. Okay. What we didn't know is they were split testing this company because they brought them in to train these divisions, and they were using half of the salespeople to train on their stuff. And in the other division, they were using us, and they were split testing. Google's smart, right? So they're split testing the whole process. In that 3 months, that company got them negative 11%. Their sales actually went down. Okay. This is the biggest sales training company in the world at that time. They've been around since 1971. I'm not going to name names. Okay. We came in unknown, 244% increase. They actually told us they audited those results 4 times because they didn't believe it. They thought it was a mistake. Okay. That's a difference in using human behavior rather than, jamming your solution down their throat and like trying to objection handle all the time. I'd rather teach skills that actually prevent objections from even happening in the first place.
Some of the best resources to get better at human behavior.
Well, probably going through our sales training courses, because I'm saying that as bias, but there's some good books out there.
Hey, you wouldn't be a salesperson if you weren't on this podcast trying to sell. I love it.
Well,
don't worry.
There's some good books out there that teach the theory from like professors, but from what I found, there's really nothing that actually takes a theory and like implements it in like question-based structures, if that makes sense. But a good book to start thinking about human behavior is by Daniel Pink. It's called To Sell as Human. Yep. I would suggest start there. It's a great book, To Sell as Human by Daniel Pink. I'm going to be a promoter for him. It's a great book that will give you kind of an introduction of how a prospect views salespeople, and how most of the resistance you get is actually triggered by you, the salesperson, not by them. So when I always hear the statement like, "Oh, buyers are liars," well, no shit, Sherlock. They lie because of you, because you're triggering their behavior. You're triggering them to lie to you because they don't trust you, and they become skeptical and they become cautious from what you're saying. So buyers are liars because of you, not them.
So when it comes to persuasion, right? I want, if we can, tools we could apply instantaneously, whether it's on our sales calls, in our ads, in life in general. What are some of the golden nuggets you have?
Well, be specific. Like, what type of golden nuggets are you looking for? I got lots of golden nuggets, man.
I know.
I don't want to throw mud against the wall and hope.
No. Just when it comes to persuasion, how can we become better persuaders? What are some, I guess maybe trigger words or trigger questions, I guess, that aren't consequential, but leading the client somewhere or persuading.
Well, let me give you just a few examples, and I'll kind of show you what to do instead. So, like I said, most objections you get as a salesperson are triggered by what you're saying. Okay. So for example, we were just teaching a big roofing company this. They were like, oh, it was like the heavens opened in their mind, because they were making sales, but then like 60 to 70% would cancel before the people got there to install the roof. And that's a problem, right? You lose a lot of revenue when you have half of your people canceling. That's not a sale. And a lot of it was they just they would say weird things at the end, like, okay, here's the contract. Can you look over it and just sign the contract? And I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Okay, nobody wants to sign a contract, okay? Because people view contracts as like something that's going to lock them into something they maybe regret. So instead of saying sign the contract, we just change it to authorize the agreement. Means the same thing, but how does that sound compared to sign the contract? Would you rather sign a contract or authorize the agreement?
Obviously, authorize the agreement.
Okay, right? You see that little change there?
Yeah,
so authorize the agreement means the same damn thing, and people they're okay with authorizing an agreement to get the roof installed. They're okay with authorizing the agreement to get their problem solved, right? But they don't like signing the contract. Okay, it's just that trigger word. And you know what? One of the best people that knows how to use neutral languaging, it's the freaking government. They do a crazy good job at this. It's really deceptive. But let's take a look at the IRS. It stands for Internal Revenue Service. Revenue, okay? If it was called the Internal Taxing Service, which means the same thing, we would all be up in arms. Taxing service? But revenue is a far more neutral word, okay? So the government does a really good job on this. So you want to avoid some of those trigger words that just trigger people to act that way, and you can just neutralize them. So a lot of times when we're talking with prospects, we might say the word possibly, or this might work for you. We're not going to say like, oh, this is going to work for you for sure, like in the first 30 seconds, because they view you as like biased, like, oh, he's just trying to sell me. Of course he's going to say that. But I'm like, well, based on what you've told me, what we're doing might actually work for you. Might actually doesn't trigger resistance. It's just neutral. Okay. It's not saying it's not going to work for you. It's not saying it is. I'm just might actually work for you. Okay. It's just a neutral term that doesn't trigger resistance, especially from A-type personalities. And another thing you can do, let's say your prospect says during the conversation that, this problem is causing them stress and frustration. And then we would probe off that. Hold on. What do you mean by stress? Oh, it's done this and it's done that. Okay. And how long have you had that stress for? That's a probing question. Oh, it's been going on for 2 years. Okay. So that stress, has that had an impact on you? Oh my gosh, you have no idea, right? And it blows them up. Now at the end, and I'm transitioning into my presentation, there's a lot through this. I'm just giving you little nuggets here. And I'm transitioning into my presentation on how I'm going to bring up the problems they said and how we solve those problems for our prospects. And I say, yeah, because John, based on what you've told me, what we're doing might actually work for you, because you know how you're saying, and I repeat back what they said they wanted. And then I repeat back what's preventing them from getting what they want. And then I say, and because of that, it's caused you to feel, I think you'd mentioned a little bit of stress sometimes. A little bit? You have no idea the stress. Now, if I said this, and I think it's causing you a lot of stress sometimes, well, it's not that bad.
Yeah.
You see how that works with human behavior? They're just going to argue against what you said. So I'm going to downplay, like, I think you'd mentioned it's causing you a little bit of stress sometimes. Oh my gosh, you have no idea the stress. And now I'm helping them relive the pain more. But if I say, I think you'd mentioned it's causing you a lot of stress. Now, some people will say, yeah, it is. But a lot of people, especially if they're A-type, like, well, I mean, it's not that bad. Don't get me wrong. And then what are you going to do then?
Yeah. I love it. That's great. It's great. I was hoping you would keep going. I like it.
You want me to give you another one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I gave this on Brad Lee's podcast the other day. He asked me to do this for him. So I just think it's kind of funny. It's just a way to show you how human behavior works. So let's say that you're meeting with a business. Let's say you sell B2B complex selling environment, and you come into the boardroom meeting and they're just like in your grill, which happens a lot, right? Especially if they're busy. Okay. And let's say they like their vendor, and like, well, Jeremy, I mean, just get to the point. Like, why should we go with you? Now, what would most salespeople say if somebody asked them that question early on in the conversation? Well, Jeremy, just get to the point. We've got a good company. Like, why should we go with you? Make your best pitch. What would most salespeople do?
They'd either get stumped, frazzled, or start telling why their competitor is bad, or all the differentiated factors between them and the competitors.
Yeah, they'd be like, well, John, the reason why you should go with us is because we've got X and we've got Y and Z, and we've got the best customer service, and we've got the best quality, and we've been rated #1 by the Better Business Bureau the last 3 years. Wah, 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 wah. And then they start talking bad about our competitors, blah, 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 blah. And then the prospect's like, be gone. That's what most salespeople do. They start giving their best pitch. I hate the word. We actually have shirts that we send out to our client salespeople that say hashtag ditch the pitch. Hashtag ditch the pitch. All right. We got to ditch the pitch. All right. Hey, I hate that pitch word. It's like,
I'm smiling because I know where you're going. So
I'm pitching.
Yeah.
So what I do, what we teach salespeople to do in that circle is if they say, well, why should we go with you? And we step back and we say, well, I'm not quite sure you should yet. And to be frank, I'd have to know a little bit more around XYZ situation just to see if we could even help you in the first place. Now, what does that do in the prospect's mind?
One is disarms them completely.
Disarms them completely.
And you build so much credibility and trust there.
Yeah. Why do you build credibility and trust? By saying that you might not even be able to help them. Because that's going to be something completely different.
Because in their mind, they believe that if you can't help them, you won't take them on, and it's not a pitch anymore.
Yes. It disarms the prospect. Okay. So like I said, I'm going to show you different things in human behavior that sales trainers they'd be like, huh? They've never taught that to salespeople because they don't understand human behavior and the way the brain works. Selling is about disarming the prospect throughout the conversation, throughout the whole sales process. I don't care if you have a 1-call close or a 2-call close or a 4-call close or a 3 or 4 or 6 or year complex selling environment close. Each stage of your sales process is about continually disarming the prospect and allowing them to feel comfortable enough to tell you the truth of what's really going on. And when you do that, that's how you make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year as a salesperson. Your businesses flourish, you solve problems, your customers thank you for sending their money to you to get them where they want to go.
So I'm going to throw another one at you because you started the podcast with it. That saying most people just say, I'm just following up.
Yeah.
What's the right way?
Well, so if they call back and just say, I'm just following up, it would depend on the industry. We would just never use the words follow up. Okay. I might say, let's say if this lead was somebody you talked to a month ago. All right. And they were supposed to get their funds together, blah, 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 blah. And so they said, hey, John, I'm just following up with you to see how it's going. Don't say that. You're like, hey, is this John? Hey, John, just Jeremy Miner. I just had time to get back to you. I know we were talking a month ago about you possibly getting your funding together to X, Y, and Z. How's your funding coming along? Okay, I'm just getting back to you is better than I'm just following up. That follow up, every salesperson since like before the earth was made, before Adam and Eve walked in the Garden of Eden, has been saying, I'm just following up with you. So that is a trigger word you want to like completely avoid as a salesperson.
So the connection I'm seeing a lot with what you teach when it comes to sales is the same thing I see with marketing, right? When everyone's preaching go left, or this is my right, right?
Yeah.
If it would be helpful if I knew my left and right. But if everyone's preaching go left, kind of, go right. When everyone's zigging, go zagging.
If you want to be great. Yeah. I mean, everybody asks me like, where did you develop NEPQ? That stands for Neuro-Emotional Persuasion Questions. So like I said, when I was in college, my degree was behavioral science and human psychology. And I studied 2 people that I do all of our sales training through as far as like human behavior, Socrates and Jesus Christ himself. Okay. 2 of the most powerful influencers, obviously of all time, Christ himself, of course. So the reason why they influence so many is not by telling people what their problems were and telling people how they could help them and telling people how they could solve them, but they asked easy to answer questions that allowed their viewers, their audience, their people, their followers, that allowed them to question their way of thinking, that allowed their situation to keep happening. And because they were able to do that and got them thinking and questioning their way of thinking and their belief system, they looked at them as the expert, the trusted authority. Okay. Now there's a lot more to that, but that's where NEPQ comes from. That's why we're able to go from companies like Google AdWords to Kia Motors, completely different industry, to Lion Financial, completely different industry, to real estate agents, to SaaS salespeople, to cybersecurity, to cars, to boats, to computers, to anything.
Because people are people.
Duplicatable results in every industry. And those industries have never even sold it. So how are we getting them 2, 3, 400% increases in sales if I've never even sold it? It's because of the sales structure and understanding human behavior. Once we find what the products and services do, like what problems do they solve? Okay. How do they solve that? And what does that mean for the prospect? It's easy for us to train companies on what to do. It doesn't matter.
We'll wrap up with this. I know you're not the master this line or have this in your arsenal type of guy, but if you were going to master or tell the listeners to have a line in their arsenal or a saying in their arsenal, what would it be?
You're going to be surprised here. So, let's say if you have an inbound lead, and I might, we always frame the first part of the call, very, very small frame. We don't like at the end of the call, it's either going to be yes or no. There's not going to be, I want to think it over. That's how a lot of sales trainers think. I'm like, oh my God, you're just triggering sales users the whole call. Because now they're going to think that you're going to pitch them at the end. Like, so stupid. That doesn't work. So I'm going to say, yeah, I would say the first part of this call is really more for us to find out, more about your background, kind of what you're using now. And I would say, what you're looking for, to see if we can actually help you, because there are some people where there's just nothing we can do for them. That's one line. Yeah. I mean, there are some people that we just can't help. Why would I say that?
Again, same reason,
disarming the prospect. When you disarm the prospect, because a lot of people are like, well, doesn't that mean that they don't feel like you're confident in what you're doing? No. I'm just saying there's some people that we might not be able to help. I'm very neutral there. They start to trust you, okay? It's like the government always saying like, oh, we've got the most jobs ever have come back. Oh my gosh, the best job market in the world. We've created the best economic plan. No. Like, people aren't dumb. Like, just the lockdowns ended and restaurants opened up and like businesses are now open. Like, there wasn't like some plan that just brought in 10 million extra jobs. Like, people aren't stupid. So it's the same thing with your prospects. Like, they know, like,
and if you can actually help them and say you could help them, they're like, oh, wow, I'm one of the few that he could actually help.
They view you as like the expert. I mean, when you say that, they're like, wow, this person like knows what he's doing. Right. They when you say like, yep, we help, we can do everything. Like, we're the best in the best. And, we've got the best product in the market. Like, name me one salesperson, anybody on here that's ever sold you anything that said they're the 5th or 6th best in the market. Nobody. I'll keep waiting. Everybody says they're the best. So when you say things like that, you actually lose credibility with your prospects and you lose trust, because they're used to every salesperson saying the exact same damn thing. Now, you don't need to go tell them you're the 5th or 6th best. You just don't need to say anything. You don't need to say that. You don't bring it up. They just assume because of your questioning skills that you are the best. Your questioning skills builds respect. It builds authority. It builds trust. Building trust is not asking about the weather or how's Dallas? I live in Atlanta. I hate Atlanta. Like, that's tough. That shit doesn't work. Like, people see right through it. They know you're not authentically asking how the weather is where they live or do they like their city. Like, nobody cares. You build trust by the questions you ask where they view you as the expert. That's how you build trust. 100%.
Final question. I want to give you the opportunity to talk about it. I know you have a new book coming out, the new model of selling to an unsellable generation. What made you decide to write that? And what is the unsellable generation? Is it just that we're just so innovative?
Well, it's my first book. And, we started the company 3 years ago and everybody's been like, when are you writing a book? When are you writing a book? When are you writing? It's like everything I hear. When are you writing a book? Like, what the hell's wrong with you? And I'm like, I'm busy. I haven't set the time across. So I've got a good friend named Jerry Acuff, who's the CEO of Delta Point. It's one of the largest sales consulting firms in the country. He's been running his firm for 22, 23, 24 years now. And we decided to write the book together. He's written many best-selling. The last one he wrote was, I might be butchering the name. Just look up Jerry Acuff. But Stop Acting Like a Seller, or Stop acting like a seller and start thinking like a buyer, or something like that. So it's just really good. So it's more customer driven, more focused. So we decided to write the book together about really how selling has changed. Because I think a lot of people just don't get it, right? They think that human behavior, people buy the same way they did in 1898 when the first AIDA model of selling was actually invented. I mean, that's the sales model that most salespeople use, or some type of consultative model that came out like 50 years ago, okay? Surface level stuff. So I think, before you can solve your problem, you first have to know what your problem is. And so the book addresses what problems salespeople have that they just don't know they have. Okay. And then it talks about how we live in an unsellable generation. We talked about, from Brandon Kane, 3 billion content providers out there that you're competing to get attention with. You have to understand how the human brain works when they're in like overload of something selling them all the time. And so we go through the whole sales structure from connecting questions all the way to commitment questions, like getting them to close themselves. We go through those, a lot more examples of like words you want to eliminate, right? That trigger resistance. And that's why we're writing the book. But I tell you what, if anybody wants to know more information about what we do, the best way to find out about us and our training is to join our Facebook group. It's called Sales Revolution.
We'll link it up.
Okay, you can look it up. I can have my assistant send you the link, but you can go to Sales Revolution on Facebook. We let you join for free, of course. When you join, there's like a 2-question or 3-question survey. We ask you like what industry you're in, what products you sell, because we keep track of all that stuff. And right when you join the Facebook group, all we do is we tag you, and then we check your DMs, and we'll message you over a free 45-minute training on objection prevention. Like, what questions do you ask in the sales process that prevent objections from even happening? So if you're a salesperson, you want to sell more. If you're a business owner, you want your salespeople to perform more. I would say the best place to learn about us is Sales Revolution Facebook group for sure.
Jeremy, thank you so much for doing this. Tons of knowledge. I mean, we could go another hour about this, but
we went an hour, man. That was quick.
I love it. For the listeners who we're going to put all the links up, but if they want to reach out to you, they want to learn more about you, how can they reach out to you?
Like I said, just Sales Revolution Facebook group. It's the best way. If you want to learn more about what we do, join that group. You can always tag me, and either myself or somebody on my team will just message you more details, something like that. Sales Revolution. You can obviously go to our website as well. That's seventh level hq.com, seventhlevelhq.com. But if you want to learn like training, what we do, Sales Revolution Facebook group. We started that about 6 months ago. We got about 9,700 salespeople, and they're almost 10,000 now. It's growing pretty rapidly.
Awesome. Jeremy, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
All right, my man. Thank you.
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want, check out our most recent video over here. And this one is the one YouTube thinks you'll like. But if you really enjoyed watching, please do me a favor, like and subscribe over here. Thank you so much.